Hello Periscope and welcome to the Great Court of the British Museum. It's about 6 o'clock in the evening in London, and as you can see, the glorious spring evening sun is kind of running through the glass of the Great Court. We're here because it's Museum Week. Museums all around the world have been using Twitter to tell us about their collections, about the people that work in their spaces, the stories that their museums, their institutions can tell us. And we've been doing it too, so please do go check out our Twitter feed at some point to look at what we've been doing throughout the week. But right now we decided to up the ante. We decided that we would do not one, not two, but 3 Periscopes this evening. They are going to be roughly 10-15 minutes in length, unless you guys are really liking it, in which case we will extend them. There'll be a 20-minute break, and then the next one will start. Around 7 o'clock this evening, we will have curator Marcel talk us through the Egyptian Sculpture Gallery, which is where, most famously perhaps, the Rosetta Stone is located, but also you can look at the chronology of Egypt from start to finish, and he will read you some really quite fascinating hieroglyphs, as well as take you through the development of art in Egypt. And before I tell you about anything else that we're doing, I'd like to stop you and show you what the museum staff affectionately call the Lonely Rider. As you can see, he's riding a tiny horse. It's done for perspective. It's to make him look like he's riding a regular-sized horse, and so you can actually see the figure. But my favourite thing about it is absolutely not historic whatsoever. It is, if you look at him from a particular angle, it looks as though he's texting and writing, which I've always really quite liked. So if you see just there, he's kind of on his phone, he's doing his thing. I don't really know how the Romans dealt with texting and writing. I'm not really sure it was an issue for them. But anyway, sorry, I'm digressing. So we'll have Marcel in the Egyptian Sculpture Gallery at about 7 o'clock. Prior to that, we'll have the incredible Dr. Irving Finkel. Don't say we don't clean up after ourselves. The incredible Dr. Irving Finkel telling us about cuneiform, which is one of the oldest scripts in the world, possibly the oldest script. That's a very contentious academic argument. He may tell you more about it. But there are 130,000 tablets in the arts room, which is where they study cuneiform. He claims to have read all of them at least 3 times, and he will talk you through the wonders that are cuneiform. But before any of that, I would like to take you to my favourite gallery, where one of my favourite curators will introduce you to the museum and its history more generally. It is the Enlightenment Gallery. I'm just going to chill up, have a look. Yeah, okay. It's Janet Larkin.
Hi, hello everybody. Thanks, hi everybody, I'm Janet Larkin. I have the great privilege really to be the manager of this amazing space, which means I look after the sort of day-to-day care of it, look after the objects in it. We send them out on loan over the world and that kind of thing. So we do all the object moves, tend to their needs in terms of humidity and temperature and all that kind of thing. And so the general day-to-day maintenance. It's an amazing room, as you can see. It's the oldest part of the museum that we know today. And as we go around, you will notice that being the oldest part of the museum, it does creak. We've got a very creaky floor. It is the original. It was put in between 1823 and 1827, and it's quite noisy. So forgive that as we go around. But as you can see, it's beautiful, mahogany and oak inlay, and really rather stunning. Complements the room beautifully. So this room, the King's Library, also known as the Enlightenment Gallery, discovering the world in the 18th century. First wing of the present museum buildings to be built. If you'd have been standing here 200 years ago to the day, you've been standing in a 7.5 acre garden of this building. This is the original Montague House. Stands much closer to Great Russell Street than we do now. We're standing in the gardens. That was purchased to house the collection of Hans Sloane, our founder, and there's a marvellous terracotta bust of him just over there. Fantastically curly wig. So, by about 1820, Montague House, as I say, first home of the museum, is getting fuller and fuller. People are giving amazing collections to us, and space is at a real premium. And then something happens that really prompts the museum to think about building a new home. And we need just to move over here to this guy. Okay, this is George III, King George III. This bust on later is from the V&A, it's a particularly lovely one. He dies in 1820. He's a bibliophile, a lover of books. He has about 80,000 books and volumes, 20,000 pamphlets, 15,000 coins and medals, all kinds of atlases and folios. And after his death, his son, George IV, the one we all know that's the sort of dandy Prince Regent from back in the day, Blackadder series and all those lovely stories of his antics have a grain of truth. He wants to remodel Buckingham House into Buckingham Palace. His father's vast library is in the way of the new kitchens he wishes to install. He also wants to ingratiate himself with the government because he's horribly in debt. So he gives his father's vast library to the nation. If you listen very carefully, you'll hear a sharp intake of breath from the curators at the old Montague House. Where on earth are we going to put it all, basically? So that prompts the building of this room. In the centre of the ceiling, I should just show you too, way up there and got picked out in gold, is the cipher or emblem of King George IV to celebrate his great and generous gift and donation. So, enter this man into the story. This is Sir Robert Smirke, architect of this wonderful room, and indeed much of the rest of the museum actually. He works for the Clerk of Works, he's very well respected. He's a contemporary of people like John Adam and Nash, the person who built the Nash Terraces around Regent's Park. And he focuses very much on this wonderful Greek revival interior. It's very much the height of fashion. And he gives us this beautiful room. He uses all sorts of pioneering techniques in the construction of the room, including cast iron supports of the ceiling, top quality materials, wonderful colour scheme, and the books are installed. Here the books stay until the British Library leave us into their wonderful new buildings up at St Pancras in the 1990s. And the museum has a vast library with no books. The books you see now are on loan to us from the House of Commons. We have an awful lot of loans from other institutions in this particular room, which is a really good thing, to reunite and keep the look of the library, the look of the English Country House library feel. Let's wander along. Now, looking at this gallery, you'll notice minimal labelling, a chance for the visitor really to step back and see the collections in the way they would have been viewed in the 18th century. People beginning to enjoy the age of reason, assembling knowledge, assembling artefacts, comparing and contrasting things in order to try and see the world in a different, more enlightened way. Very much the story of the British Enlightenment in here, with British artefacts and very much the Western European point of view. But let's wander along.
Where are the dinosaurs?
Where are the dinosaurs? We're heading there right now, so that's really handy. Okay. Now, those of you who've seen Night at the Museum 3 will know that Stegosaurus did a bit of chasing through these galleries here. When the Natural History Museum split off into our sister institution at South Kensington, all the dinosaurs and animal specimens moved with them. That was Hans Sloane's major founding collection, about 80,000 animal specimens. But fortunately, the Natural History Museum have allowed us to have some of them back. And here we have the wonderful skull of an ichthyosaur, which would have been about 4 metres long, a sea lizard, rather crocodile-like in a way, discovered by Mary Anning. Now, if you know the old tongue twister about seashells on the seashore, that's Mary Anning. That was written after her lifetime, but she became very famous in her own right. Young woman, eldest of the siblings, she supported her family after her parents' death by fossicking for fossils. And she found the head of the ichthyosaur, and then I think the next season, the rest of its body. Obviously, this results in a kind of rethinking of the world as we know it, because obviously many Europeans believe the Bible was an historical document. As we know, all the animals got on the ark 2 by 2 and survived the flood, but we don't see ichthyosaurs when we go to the seaside now, do we? So that's a great thing to have back, really. Many other fossil specimens here. Wonderful ammonite over there.
Janet, we've had some questions about the books. Someone would like to know what are the books that are in here, and someone else has asked about how they're protected from light damage.
Well, the books are a real sort of mixture. The sort of subjects covered would have been in the original Royal Library, so there are things about travels, explorations, diaries, county histories, that kind of thing. We touch on agriculture and science, which are two of George III's big interests. So a real mix, all with beautiful bindings, as you'll see. They're protected now by a film on the glass, and also by the blinds on the windows, which you may hear move, perhaps while we're recording this. But basically they change according to the time of day to protect everything from the light. It's not only the books that would be damaged by that, many of the objects would as well. I'll show you two things over here actually that would also be susceptible to light. And that's these. Obviously with the birth of the study of natural history also comes the study of botany. Great explorations going on, bringing back all kinds of samples of things. And these are wonderful collages. They look like paintings or watercolours, made by an elderly lady called Mary Delaney, who was, believe it or not, was 72 when she started making these, and she made about 100 of them. And they're tiny, weeny, chopped up pieces of paper to form these wonderful designs. There's another one in the case further along. And totally botanically accurate. So she was great friends with the folk at Kew and all the experts of the day, who very much valued her work in creating these representations in such really fine detail, actually. So, moving a bit further along the gallery, as you can see, we've got it becomes a real sort of cabinet of curiosities, if you like, which many of the sort of scholars and gentry of the day, the people who were rich enough to acquire these objects, would have had. They would have had curiosities they would have brought out and shown people when they visited. But the whole period really prompts this new realisation that many of the sort of ideas people had about objects in the past were not quite correct. For example, Sloane thought that these little objects here were actually the arrows of elves. They couldn't possibly dream, of course, of their real age at the time, but they're actually between about 3,000, 6,000 years old. But as archaeology begins to develop as its own science, more and more things are discovered, people begin to appreciate that things aren't quite as they would have imagined and understand more about the past. I should have shown you this, actually. This is a wonderful representation print of the gallery as it would have looked in 1880 when the library was all here, George III's library was all here. You'll see many of the showcases we've upgraded for modern use, used as desks and spaces to lay out folios and atlases. Now here is a man many of you may have heard of, Charles Townley, representing this very nice bust. Great collector, went on the Grand Tour 3 times and amassed a huge collection of sculpture, many of which we were lucky enough to be able to acquire after his death. One of his favourite pieces, is one of my favourite pieces in the gallery too really, is Clytie. And apparently, as I say, she was Townley's favourite piece. There's a wonderful painting, which I have here, which shows Townley and some of his scholarly friends in his study, surrounded by many of his most famous sculptures. I think it's a slightly fanciful sort of arrangement, but you'll notice Clytie just on his desk in a very prominent position. Apparently when his house was attacked during the Gordon riots, she was the one thing he rescued, so he was fond of her, I think. So in this section, as well as having a loan from the British Library of some of George III's original books back again and concentrating on his coins and medals, we touch on his interest in the birth of science. Here in this wonderful orrery on loan from the Science Museum, which features Copernicus's views on the arrangement of the universe, the sun at the centre and all the planets going around the sides. As you can see, you can pick them out. And obviously by 1750 they knew about planets as far as Saturn, so Saturn is the last one. Wonderful piece, that. It's got a large turning handle on the side, which I would really like to, somebody would come and demonstrate it, see it all moving about, would be amazing. Okay, so as I mentioned, a real cabinet of curiosities. One of the most curious things, that's a wonderful bust of Minerva just there, again one of Townley's. One of the most curious things has to be, I would say, this object here, our merman. He's kind of gruesome really, he's got rather nasty looking teeth. He is sadly a monkey head and a fish body stuck together and sold in Japan and the Far East as a curio, really. Might be able to see him slightly clearer now. People still ask me if it's a real merman. I'm really quite often tempted to say yes. So, that's the parent. Yes, of course. Let's head on over there. This is a real mixture, actually. It's called the Piranesi vase, and assembled out of all sorts of bits and bobs, really. It didn't start off life quite like that. But the chap called Giovanni Piranesi used to make etchings and sketches and artworks, and also assemblages such as this. Obviously, a lot of the Europeans are going on the grand tour. They would quite often like to see things they would like to bring home, perhaps install these in your wonderful stately garden. And Piranesi obviously produced this for such a purpose. So it's a bit of a fake, actually, and never started off life altogether. But it's such an impressive piece. Very much.
Someone would like to know, what's the oldest object in this gallery?
That's a very good question. It must be the hand axes down the far end.
How old are they?
Oh, they're prehistoric, yeah, and of course the dinosaurs. So that's wandering further along. Again, this gallery is 300 feet long, and 4,000 objects roughly from the stores of the museum were actually put in here to make this wonderful display. A real curiosity, I must say, in total. But you need to come and explore and be curious in the way the people of the time would have been, I would say. It also has a few little quirks. This is one. I have 3 secret doors, which would have led originally to the librarian's offices when George III's library was here. Still used as offices in the museum today, but occasionally when you appear from behind this door when the visitors are in the gallery, they get a bit of a shock and tell me it's something like Harry Potter. Okay, finally, we talk about trade and discovery at the far end of the gallery. In this section we do decipherment, the discovery and breaking of ancient scripts, really, so that we understand them as we know today. We have a replica of the Rosetta Stone. The original is in the glass case in Gallery 4. This invites people to sort of get up and touch it and feel it and see it in much closer detail. The same text written over and over again 3 times in hieroglyphics, in Demotic and in ancient Greek. Really useful that the same text is repeated 3 times because it greatly aided the decipherment of them. Also, we show things such as the cuneiform tablets. Now, these have been variously described as looking like dog biscuits and or looking like wet pieces of clay that tiny birds have walked all over. The man coming up in about 20 minutes or so time, my colleague Evan Finkel, is going to tell you all about cuneiform and its decipherment. So tune in again soon.